Good morning, fantastic people. I hope you're having a great start to your day. Thank you, Lord, for this new day. We are so grateful for every new day we get. I am totally under the weather, so please bear with me. I'm going to try to get through these videos today as best I can, but I'm not operating at 100%. Not that I ever am, but hey, let's see. I lost a couple of days here. I'm so behind in videos. It's hard to figure out where to start, what to cover, what to focus on. I mean, we have this whole Charlie Kirk scandal, which is just, it's so pathetic. We still don't even know if he's dead. We don't know if Erica and TPUSA and the FBI and the Mormons of Utah, Freemasons, what have you, assassinated Kirk, if it was the Israelis or whatever, but we know that the U.S. government's definitely involved. TPUSA certainly is. But the Charlie Kirk assassination is becoming a Candace Owens affair. So once again, is it controlled opposition? We don't know. She certainly has Catholic ties. She may have Freemason ties. TPUSA might be a Freemason organization. We just don't know. We don't know if the assassination plot against Candace Owens is real, but if it is, hello? What war? What war is that French assassin talking about? It's just a mess. Everything is just such a mess. We do know, however, that Minnesota it's falling. It's falling rapidly. And there are certain things that I do want to cover about Minnesota, especially St. Paul. I've discovered a lot of interesting things regarding Melvin Carter and the situation going on there. But first, I think it's important to address the information I received recently regarding the corruption in the state of Pennsylvania. Specifically, the allegations against Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. Now, on the surface, Brian Fitzpatrick looks like a model citizen. He's A-OK. He is the most bipartisan representative, and I believe that that is by design. I believe that he goes back and forth between Democratic policy and Republican policy because he wants everybody to like him. So much so that they don't look into him. He wants to stay off the radar. And I think he's done a great job so far. But evil always ends up showing its face. Yeah, I do believe Brian Fitzpatrick is evil. I absolutely do. And I want to share with you today what I have discovered. Now, it has recently been brought to my attention that Brian Fitzpatrick helped to destabilize Ukraine, and he certainly, without a doubt, is promoting war against Russia. Russia, right? Ever since Hillary Clinton said America's greatest threat is Russia, I've been inclined to believe that Russia is a lot more benevolent than we've been led on. Perhaps Russia isn't the problem. Perhaps Russia should actually be one of our greatest allies. Now, we know about the Cold War and how we drug that on and on and on, thanks to Prescott Bush and all those losers back then. We also have recently been hearing about, Pike and the 3 world wars. So when this French assassin, is talking about a war, You have to look into Alfred Pike, because his first two wars came to fruition. So naturally, it's safe to assume that the Third World War is exactly as he detailed it to be. So, what does this have to do with Brian Fitzpatrick, right? Brian Fitzpatrick is being accused of child trafficking. Now, I have stated in previous videos that Ukraine is a hub for child trafficking. Romanian Angels, Erica Kirk, and Kash Patel have been associated with child trafficking into Ukraine with Romanian children, probably out of Ukraine as well. Brian Fitzpatrick has been alleged to be trafficking children out of the Ukraine too. So, stabilizing Ukraine to promote the war with Russia and child trafficking. And we also have the pandemic with the bioweapons labs in the Ukraine. I want to get into that and how I believe Brian Fitzpatrick is partially responsible, along with many, many other Americans and citizens, international citizens as well. I do believe Brian Fitzpatrick helped to manufacture the COVID pandemic. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Little known fact about Brian Fitzpatrick, if you even know who he is a state representative of the wealthiest district in Pennsylvania. If you didn't know, there's an area in Pennsylvania that is very elitist. You have celebrities like Tina Fey buying mansions in Bucks County. So there is a lot of money in Brian Fitzpatrick's district. So it would make sense that somebody must be supplying these elitists with children, because we know how the elitists are. We know how these wealthy elitists are. They're pedophiles, a lot of them. And they're also involved in these satanic rituals and just absolutely disgusting, horrifying acts against children. So, where are they getting their children from, especially with closed borders? Well, very possibly Brian Fitzpatrick. Let's go into the history here. Deep dive into Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. I apologize if I don't make sense. I'm going to do my best. I can't even find my own information here. Where are we? What's going on here? Where am I? Brian Fitzpatrick. He's got this dopey look about him, like this dopey, baby Huey, dork next door look. But you know who else had that dork next door look? Jeffrey Dahmer. Looks can be deceiving, folks. Who else? Who else has that dopey guy next door kind of look? The alleged Butler assassin? Don't judge a book by its cover. In my previous video, I explained to people how pornography leads to pedophilia and how parents are supposedly the biggest abusers, sex abusers of children, and creators of child porn. I also told you about how America is ranked #1 for child porn. Since the popularization of the internet in the mid to late 1990s, the problem of child sexual abuse material, what they call CSAM, has been growing exponentially. In this article, CSAM refers to images and videos in which children are sexually abused and exploited. For the last 20 years, reports of CSAM to U.S. authorities have increased by an average of 50% per year, to the point where nearly 29 million reports of suspected abuse images and videos were made to American authorities in 2021. 29 million reports of suspected abuse images and videos in 2021 alone. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Our politicians know these statistics. And every state who doesn't have laws protecting children from child pornography, and especially from the internet, you got to look at their leadership, because they're corrupt. They're evil, and they're corrupt, and they're complicit. And I know a lot of people are all in a huff and a puff. They're trying to brain. They're trying to ban the internet. They're trying to make it so that we can't use the internet, so that we can't get this information. We can't share information with one another. Okay, right. Yeah, they might be doing that, but this is a separate issue. We need to protect our kids. Do you understand? I don't care how inconvenient it might be for you to prove that you're an adult before you can view porn. Because in my opinion, porn should be banned from the internet, because porn is destructive. There isn't a single good thing about porn. I mean, you can have morons like Kamala Harris tour the world and promote pornography. That doesn't mean that porn's good. It just means that she's evil. Look at her new logo. She's a pig. She's a disgusting human being. She's evil. And yeah, Trump is definitely better than Kamala Harris as president. Let's not even get into that dumb, retarded debate, okay? Let's not even go there. Kamala Harris is a proven child trafficker who is roaming free and getting paid to give these speeches promoting pornography, which leads to child sexual abuse. Let's be very clear about who she is. What we're not quite clear about is whether Trump is actually stopping the child trafficking, or if he just took over the child trafficking network. All signs, you can't say all signs, a lot of signs point to him just taking it over. Yeah, but that's mainly regarding Jeffrey Epstein. When you look into child trafficking, I mean, he has closed the borders. Of course that has stopped a tremendous amount of trafficking. Kamala and Joe trafficked 300,000 children approximately. UACs, unaccompanied alien children. Prior to them, Obama was trafficking. We know this. The Clintons were trafficking. The Bushes were trafficking. Reagan was likely trafficking. And that goes back to Prescott Bush, right? He's likely trafficking as well. They created the problem in order to create the solution, which I believe was getting Trump back into office. I don't believe Trump is benevolent. When he first ran for president, I did my research. What I found I didn't like at all about him. I didn't vote for him. I knew Clinton was evil, so I didn't vote for her either. But then after the absolute disaster of the Biden-Kamala Harris administration and the open borders and the largest invasion known to humankind that took place in those 4 years, we had no choice but to vote Trump. And I believe that was by design. I believe Q was a psyop. I believe Trump was a psyop. And I hope to God I'm wrong. Just like I hope to God that I'm wrong about Candace Owens being controlled opposition. Just like I hope I'm wrong about Brian Fitzpatrick. But the evidence regarding Brian Fitzpatrick, it's not good. It's not good for him. We need to ban porn from the internet. And these degenerates need to go back to having to be humiliated to these shady little solo rinky-dink porn shacks that we used to have, right? And they were great because they usually were by themselves. So anybody going into them, it was obvious. Everybody knew, oh my gosh, that's like Principal so-and-so's car at the porn shack again, right? It was great. It kind of let us know who the degenerates in our society were. But now it's all hidden, and it's escalating, and it's leading to more and more child abuse, child sexual abuse. We need to go back to porn shacks. Books by Inu and Campagna Poffenberger in 1988 and 86 argued that most child prostitution and pornography involved teenage runaways, but observed that some CSAM was made by parental figures. Now that's important because you have states like Minnesota under Tim Walz that are sanctuary states for children, for trans people, right? Trans people, gender dysphoric disorder. Children as young as 14 who have a disorder known as gender dysphoric disorder can run away from home and find sanctuary in Tim Walz's state, meaning that the police in Minnesota don't need to work with the police from the state that this poor child ran away from. And what happens? Well, according to these studies, most child prostitution and pornography involve teenage runaways. Okay, Tim Walz, we know what you're doing. We know you're evil too. Everybody knows. I don't even think I need to do a video about Tim Walz at this point. He's such a loser. So, mental health literature began to describe a cohort of child and adult clientele reporting sexual exploitation by parents. Long-term permanent effects. Debilitating. It's absolutely tragic. It's heartbreaking. There is relatively little scholarship on parental CSAM production during the 1990s, despite expanding concern about CSAM linked to the commercialization of the internet during this period. And of course, because our presidents at the time were child traffickers. Makes sense, right? And as we're seeing in basically the legislative branch, at the executive branch, have just been involved in crimes against children for a very long time now. It's become ingrained in the U.S. government system. That the focus of policy discourse on the commercial sexual exploitation of children prioritized CSAM production for financial gain and overlooked sexual exploitation driven by other motives such as sexual pleasure and offender access to a wider pool of child victims. Makes sense, doesn't it? Why are they going to make policies about it if they're engaged in it and making money off of it? The commercialization of the internet made visible and undeniable the propensity of child sexual abusers to network with one another and produce and exchange CSAM, generating new data on the problem. And we see today it has gotten so bad because our politicians are so complicit and they refuse to protect our children. It has gotten so bad that there is now an OnlyFans for children. I believe it was established in 2023. It's called Brand Army. It is child abuse. It is absolutely disgusting. This Brand Army allows for photographs, closer interactions between these children and the internet viewers. The internet viewers can pay these children for photographs. Do you understand me? And this has been going on since 2023. They all need to go to jail. We really need to start cracking down on this. Otherwise, we're going to have like a vigilante situation. And I'm absolutely fine with that. I mean, that's how people used to handle things back in the day. You found out there was a perv in your neighborhood, you would take care of it. Our government's not going to do it. However, this review has emphasized the pervasive role that technology plays in child sexual exploitation, including the incorporation of technology into family-based sexual abuse, where images and videos of familial abuse are recorded and distributed online. That was back in 2018. Hey, Melania, why don't you do something with yourself? What's Vance's wife's name? Is she doing anything? Why doesn't anybody do anything for the kids? A picture emerges from this review of a sustained pattern of motivated ignorance of parental CSAM production among scholars and policymakers, in which ample evidence of parental perpetration is available but marginalized and ignored within academic and policy discussions of the CSAM problem. They know, and they're not doing anything about it. And we know why. So, with that little background into child pornography, child exploitation, You should see, by the way, the references for this study. I have never seen so many references attached to a study in my entire life. Look at this. Look at all this evidence, you guys. And our government does nothing. They do nothing. The states with internet porn bans or restrictions are as follows. You can see Pennsylvania is not on that list. In fact, when you look at these states, these are mainly conservative states. So you Democrats, do you see a pattern? Of course, both sides are guilty. Of course they are. But regarding governors and the states, you can't deny this. You cannot deny the fact that these Democratic states, which Pennsylvania is, don't be fooled. The majority of citizens in PA may be conservative, may be Republicans, but the leadership has not been Republican in a very long time. And Fitzpatrick is not a Republican either. Don't be fooled. We love numbers, right? We like statistics. It's important. These are facts. Porn ban mapped, right? Online pornography age verification laws in the U.S. More than a dozen states have passed new laws. And that was as of January 11, 2025. Over the last 2.5 years, 19 states, home to more than a third of Americans, have passed laws restricting pornography on the internet. So this is some progress has been made within Republican states. And I also stated in a previous video that the average age that children view porn today is 12, and how detrimental that is to a child's brain and development, and the long-term effects associated with viewing pornography for children. It's terrifying. In response to these laws, ALO, formerly MindGeek, the parent company of Pornhub, has chosen to block access to its websites in states with age verification requirements rather than implement the verification systems. Thank you, God, because that's really what we want. The company cites several concerns about the laws. They have no concerns about children viewing pornography. Pornhub is evil, as is ALO, formerly MindGeek. These are evil, evil people. Now, Pennsylvania. Okay, here we go. This bill aims to establish legal liability for internet publishers and distributors of material considered harmful to minors by requiring commercial entities to implement reasonable age verification measures when publishing or distributing such content online. The bill defines material harmful to minors as specified in existing law and mandates that websites containing more than 33.33% such content must verify users' ages using methods like government ID, digital identification, or bank account. Why? Why a third? So they can have a little bit of material that's harmful to minors and that's okay? This is a really bizarre bill. I don't trust any of these politicians anymore. I really don't. It's terrible. All right. GOP Rep Fitzpatrick. Let's get into him now. If you just do a Google search, you'll find articles like GOP Rep Fitzpatrick moves to force vote on Russia sanctions bill. Do you guys remember when Trump originally was against funding Ukraine and their illegal war? Do you remember that? Then all of a sudden he flipped, right? Seems like Trump has flipped on a lot of things this time around. And again, this is the Hill. I don't find the Hill to be reliable. I just want to let you know what they're putting out into the world right now, the kind of propaganda. So we have February 25, GOP rep calls U.S.-Ukraine resource deal victim extortion. Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican of Pennsylvania said Sunday that forcing Ukraine to agree to a resource deal with the U.S. in exchange for the possibility of support against Russia is akin to victim extortion, although the Ukrainian government are not victims. They are not victims. And I think Trump is trying to get some of our money back. That's what I think this is. Why does Brian Fitzpatrick care so much about Ukraine, you might ask? That's a great question. Fitzpatrick, Keating lead bipartisan ultimatum to Putin. You really think that a representative from Pennsylvania should be issuing an ultimatum to the leader of Russia? You really think that that's appropriate? I think that's really weird. What's he doing? That's not his job. Brian Fitzpatrick visits Kiev. Oh, really? And that was on April 7th of 2025. Brian Fitzpatrick visits Ukraine, meets with President Zelensky. That's weird. You'd think with all the corruption in Pennsylvania, he would really just focus on that, like getting the jet fuel out of the drinking water and stuff like that, right? Nope. Nope, he is in Ukraine. Fitzpatrick's stance on presidential candidates. Back in 2016, Brian Fitzpatrick initially pledged to support the Republican primary voters' choice for president. Well, he should. If he's registered as a Republican, he certainly should respect his constituents, right? However, after Donald Trump became the nominee, Fitzpatrick changed his stance and stated he would not vote for either major party candidate, instead writing in Mike Pence. That right there in itself is enough for me to know that Brian Fitzpatrick is corrupt. Mike Pence took over the COVID task force. Do you remember that? He got rid of the Surgeon General. He got rid of Dr. Ben Carson, one of the greatest doctors in the world. If you remember, originally Trump created the COVID task force, and they were great. They were wonderful Americans who were using common sense practices. They were calming down the public. They were telling people this is just like the flu. We'll take it seriously, but we need to understand that this is just like flu. And then Pence took it over, and we ended up having the Fauci, Birx, Redfield COVID task force from hell that ended up murdering so many Americans. Mike Pence should be, actually, you know what? I actually think that jail is too good for these traitors. God forgive me, but I think Charlie Kirk was right. I think we do need to bring back public executions. Our politicians are killing us. They're literally murdering us. They are stealing our children, raping them, torturing them, murdering them. Jail is too good for treasonous politicians. They deserve a firing squad, a public firing squad. I believe at this point, that is the only thing that's going to stop the corruption. July 2019, Fitzpatrick condemns Trump's remarks about the squad. Why would Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania, condemn Trump regarding these lunatics in the squad? That's strange, isn't it? In July 2019, Brian Fitzpatrick joined 3 other Republican House members in voting to condemn excuse was me to condemn inflammatory remarks made by Donald Trump about the Squad, a group of Democratic U.S. representatives who were women of color. They're not women of color anymore, and the Squad, isn't Sandy Cortez in the Squad? Well, what the heck does women of color even mean anymore? We're all females are women of color. My color is light brown with medium brown spots. Sandy Cortez's color is light brown as well. So what is he talking about, Brian Fitzpatrick? Who is the Squad? Well, it's Ilhan. Yeah, I mean, Ilhan needs to go back to Somalia. I think we all know that now. So why did Fitzpatrick condemn that? Weird. 2021, Fitzpatrick votes against Trump's second impeachment, introduced censure resolution. Voted against the second impeachment of Donald Trump. Before the vote, he introduced a censure resolution against Trump that condemned the rhetoric that led to January 6th Capitol attack. And we now know that January 6th Capitol attack was orchestrated by the FBI, by our own government. Speaking of FBI, I forgot to do the Wikipedia page on Brian Fitzpatrick, didn't I? Brian Fitzpatrick, Wikipedia. This might come as a surprise to you. It came as a surprise to me because I haven't been paying attention. Born 1973. He's an American politician, attorney, and former FBI agent who has served as a U.S. representative from Pennsylvania since 2017. And I am sorry, but I'm not sorry. Due to the history and nature of the CIA and the FBI, they should be disqualifying characteristics for the legislative branch, as far as I'm concerned, just like Zionism. It should be disqualifying. I know, isn't that terrible? I am such a bad human being. Let's see here. Member of the U.S. House of Representatives from Pennsylvania, assumed office in 2017. Preceded by Mike Fitzpatrick. Oh, they had the same last name. I wonder if they're related. Well, yeah, actually they are. It's his brother. Was he in the FBI as well? It doesn't say. So this whole family is interesting and needs to get looked into. Let's go back to our friend Brian. A moderate Republican, similar to his brother Mike. Fitzpatrick was elected in 2016 after a court-mandated redistricting of Pennsylvania's congressional districts in 2018. Fitzpatrick has since been reelected to the redrawn 1st District. He won re-election to a 5th term in 2024. Okay, let's look into his career. Well, would you look at that? He's a former special assistant, United States Attorney, and FBI supervisory special agent in California. Now, if you watch my previous video about the Matrix being Bible prophecy and the whole conspiracy to hide that knowledge from the world, you would have known this already, because he was involved in that conspiracy to steal the screenplay, twist it, and produce something that is just a complete nothing burger, basically. So he took God's word and Bible prophecy and helped hide it from the world, allegedly. But hey, special agent in California, so it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It doesn't say when. It does not say when, which is odd. So we'll look into that. At the FBI, he served as a national supervisor of the Bureau's Public Corruption Unit and led the agency's campaign finance and election crimes enforcement program. It's really interesting, isn't it? Being all the shady behavior in Pennsylvania surrounding the 2020 election. I wonder what Brian Fitzpatrick's stance was on that. I think we can guess. So he knows about election crimes. He knows a lot about election crimes. But he knows all the different ways that people can manipulate and steal elections too, right? I bet he's abreast on all of that. During his time in the FBI, he spent time in Kiev, Ukraine. That's weird, because that seems like something that the CIA would do, not the FBI. FBI is a domestic agency. So why would somebody in the FBI be traveling internationally, being involved in also in Iraq? And it doesn't say when. He was embedded with U.S. Special Forces as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Remember that? Iraqi Freedom? It seemed like a really good idea at the time. But at the time, we were lied to by the Bush administration and the FBI as to what exactly went down on 9/11. Weapons of mass destruction. Remember? They were never found. The whole reason for us to go into Iraq. And he was a part of that. I wonder if he has since said anything, Probably not. So, Wiki, for a man that's been involved in so much, Wiki has kind of limited information, wouldn't you say? And again, it does state that Fitzpatrick represents the wealthiest congregational district in the state of Pennsylvania. That's right. Fitzpatrick and Keating lead bipartisan ultimatum to Putin. Oh, that's interesting. Fitzpatrick claims that the Kremlin forcibly abducted more than 19,000 Ukrainian children. That's interesting, considering that he's been accused of trafficking children out of Ukraine, but he claims the Russians did it. Wonder if he's trying to cover up his crimes. Wonder if he's projecting in order to cover up his crimes. I wonder if he's so deeply embedded in child trafficking out of Ukraine that he is dedicated to proving that it was Russia and that we need to put all of our focus on Russia, not Ukraine. Don't look into Ukraine. It's all about Russia, right, Brian Fitzpatrick? Fitzpatrick visits Ukraine, meets with President Zelensky. Congressman speaks to top Ukrainian official. Brian Fitzpatrick calls proposed Ukraine resources deal victim exploitation. Fitzpatrick Quigley lead bipartisan, bicameral effort to protect against tyranny and to resist Russia's onslaught. I guarantee you don't even know why the Ukrainian-Russian war started in the first place. I bet you have been lied to and propagandized so greatly that you have no idea the real reason behind the Ukraine-Russian war. Oh, look at this. Fitzpatrick visits Russian border on war zone front line. Since the beginning of the war, Fitzpatrick has authored and led bipartisan efforts to deliver critical military, humanitarian, and intelligence assistance to Ukraine. Why does he love Ukraine so much? Why doesn't he put all that passion and hard work into the state of Pennsylvania, where 1 out of 6 children face food insecurity, and where jet fuel is polluted drinking water and poisoning kids, and where kids are being exploited online? Sexual abuse, pornography. Nope. Ukraine. He's super focused on Ukraine. Here we go. February 27, 2025. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick returns from overseas engagements. Brian Fitzpatrick announced he recently returned from a series of critical, high-level overseas engagements, or cover-ups. These including the Munich Security Conference in Germany, the NATO Parliamentary Assembly meeting in Brussels as part of the U.S. delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and a House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. HPSCI Codel trip to London to conduct critical oversight operations, according to Fitzpatrick. What is the representative of Pennsylvania doing involved in all this international affairs? Do you think maybe he's CIA? Do you think maybe he's a CIA agent? Or maybe he's really an FBI agent who's moonlighting as a representative for the state of Pennsylvania? And he's super corrupt. I do. And you know what? NATO, being associated with NATO and being an alleged child trafficker, that's not a good connection. Because we know what NATO has been doing. They've been exploiting children. NATO is responsible for the sexual abuse of children. We know this. This is fact, and I'll show you in a minute. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick announced he recently returned from a series of critical high-level overseas engagements. Fitzpatrick's team says these strategic meetings brought together global leaders at a defining moment for international security. Why is he doing that? That is not his job. Or is it? Or is it? Again, like I said, this is the most bipartisan member of Congress. Why? Because he just wants to make everybody happy, to keep any kind of scrutiny off of him. At the Munich Security Conference and NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Fitzpatrick says he led discussions on reinforcing NATO unity and pushing European nations to take greater responsibility in securing their continent against Russian threats. Russia, Russia, Russia. Who is his mentor? Hillary Clinton? While the United States remains the unwavering cornerstone of democracy, we're not a democracy, you loser, you traitor. We're a republic. Fitzpatrick stated that Europe must match American resolve to deter further aggression. So he's trying to encourage Europe into war. So this whole thing with Candace Owens, with this French assassin, I think it goes back to Brian Fitzpatrick and who he's representing, which appears to be the deep state. He's trying to force war with Russia. It's disgusting. This is for NATO to remain an unbreakable force. Fitzpatrick states that European allies must increase defense spending to match Russian military capabilities and bolster deterrence. All purchases of Russian... Gosh, why do they have to put bells here? What could this word be? Never, forever... Sever, end all purchases of Russian oil and gas, cutting off funding for Putin's war machine. This is like, you know what this is going to do to the Russian people? You know the Russian people are going to be affected by Brian Fitzpatrick's agenda? This is terrible. How is he getting away with this? Emulate the decisive leadership of UK Prime Minister Starmer by standing firmly with Ukraine, both militarily and diplomatically, cutting off funding for Putin's war machine. Emulate the decisive leadership. He wants us to emulate Starmer. People, you know what Starmer's doing to the citizens of UK? He's enslaving them. He's locking them up. He's abusing them. And he's probably murdering them. He's certainly raping them with his groomer gangs that he's protecting. Fitzpatrick wants people to emulate Starmer. Can I stop this video now? Can we just stop this now and investigate Fitzpatrick? Trump, why aren't you investigating Fitzpatrick? He's deep state. He is the swamp. If what I believe about Fitzpatrick to be true, jail is too good for him. But it is, I guess, a good start. Emulate the decisive leadership. Decisive leadership of Starmer. Both militarily and diplomatically. Right, because Starmer is like total role model for diplomacy. Take full ownership of their security obligations, aligning defense budgets with the realities of modern threats. The world is facing a pivotal moment, says Fitzpatrick. History will remember who stood for freedom and who faltered. The United States will always lead. Why? Why do we always have to lead into war, Fitzpatrick? But our allies must also rise to the occasion. UK is not our ally. European Union? They're not our allies. You know who our allies are? Pretty much no one at this point. Pretty much no one. Poland should be our ally. Be like Poland. We do not want UK as an ally. And that means that, let's just keep going. The United States will always lead, but our allies must also rise to the occasion. There can be no half measures in defending democracy. Okay, first of all, we're not a democracy, Brian Fitzpatrick, because we know that that's mob rule. We know that that's what you represent. You represent mob rule. And you are trying to talk nations into war with Russia. You're a disgrace. High-level NATO meetings with Secretary General Mark Rutte. As a member of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, Fitzpatrick reports that he participated in high-level strategic dialogues at NATO headquarters in Brussels, meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and fellow parliamentarians. Why? Why is this allowed to happen? Building on momentum from the Munich Security Conference, Fitzpatrick says discussions focused on enhancing European military capabilities and resilience. Globalist much? Strengthening collective deterrence measures against Russia and other adversarial threats. Forging a long-term security framework for Ukraine with sustained international backing? What? What? A strong, unified NATO where every member nation has equal skin in the game is the foundation for lasting global security. I want out of NATO. I don't even want to be a part of NATO. We shouldn't be involved in the UN, the WHO, NATO, any of these globalist organizations. Fitzpatrick is embedded in them. He is more dedicated to them and to Ukraine than to the state of Pennsylvania. You look into the education system in Pennsylvania, you look into anything in Pennsylvania, the natural gas production, it is total exploitation in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania utility bills, because the data centers skyrocketed. Let's keep going. While the U.S. remains NATO's cornerstone, Europe must meet this moment with decisive action. Meeting with Ukrainian leaders, President Zelensky and General Zaluzhnyi, at the Munich Security Conference, Fitzpatrick says he met with Ukrainian President Zelensky, reaffirming America's unwavering commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. It's a lie, people. This whole Ukrainian thing is a lie. This stand with Ukraine, it's a lie. He says he traveled for a critical meeting with General Zaluzhnyi, Ukraine's top military leader, discussing strategies for securing long-term military and economic support to ensure Ukraine's ultimate victory. Saying President Zelensky is absolutely right. There will be no peace deal on Ukraine without Ukraine at the table. The United States will make sure of that, said Fitzpatrick. So Fitzpatrick is the representative for the United States. Did you know that? It's not Trump. No, it's not the president. It's not even the vice president. No, it's some podunk from Pennsylvania. Yeah, bet you didn't know that. He's dictating U.S. foreign policy now. The United States will make sure of that, said Fitzpatrick. Freedom is never self-sustaining. It must be protected and defended. What about in Pennsylvania? What about here in the United States, Fitzpatrick? What about our freedom? What about our God-given constitutional rights? Liberty? Right to life? How about the pursuit of happiness? Ukraine's battle is not just their own. Yeah, it is. It really is. It really is their own battle. It really is. Oh, wait, no. You say that because the United States helped manufacture this war against Russia. That's why you say that. That's why it's not their own. Tricky. Tricky, tricky, tricky. Fitzpatrick is tricky. Tricky, 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 tricky. He's also a loser. President Zelensky is absolutely right about nothing. I guarantee you. You know that Zelensky is an actor, right? Do you guys know about that? He actually played the president of Ukraine and then became the president of Ukraine. He's an actor. It's probably why he got a standing ovation from world leaders. It's like the Oscars, right? Ukraine's battle is not just their own. It is a frontline defense for all nations that believe in democracy. We don't believe in democracy, loser. We don't. No. Security and the rule of law. Supporting Ukraine means rejecting aggression, reinforcing democratic principles, and ensuring that borders are not redrawn by force. America must lead with strength, principle, and unwavering resolve to defend liberty wherever it is threatened. Democratic principles? Borders are not redrawn? Where were you in the 4 years of the Biden administration? I didn't hear you speaking out passionately against open borders. Oh, okay. Now I get it. You're part of the 2030 agenda. The one where they want Canada, Mexico, and the United States to all become one nation called the North American nation. That's what Fitzpatrick means when he says redraw the borders. Yeah, the EU is a step in that too. They're redrawing they want to redraw all those borders over there and around the world. Because he's FBI. He is corrupt. He is the deep state. Supporting Ukraine means rejecting aggression, reinforcing democratic principles, and ensuring that borders are not redrawn by force. America must lead with strength, principle, and unwavering resolve to defend liberty wherever it is threatened. There can be no imposed peace agreement that does not fully guarantee Ukraine's security and sovereignty, so he is working against Trump's plan for peace. Fitzpatrick says the Ukrainian people, who freely elected President Zelensky in an election recognized by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. That's interesting that he had to include all of that in there. Why couldn't he just... Okay. Fitzpatrick says the Ukrainian people must determine their own future, not have it dictated by external forces. That sounds like a reasonable sentence, right? No, not when you're Fitzpatrick. You have to add the Ukrainian people who freely elected President Zelensky. And he goes on to say, in an election recognized by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Why'd you put all that in there? Why'd you have to include all that? Makes me wonder, maybe he wasn't freely elected. Maybe Zelensky wasn't freely elected, and maybe we need to look into this Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Loser. America must always stand for peace through strength. This is about peace through strength. This is about patriotic common sense. This isn't patriotic, it's the freaking Ukraine. Are you a Ukraine patriot, Fitzpatrick? Is that what you are? And patriotic common sense is what America must always stand for, said Fitzpatrick. He is the United States representative. You see this? He thinks he represents all of us here in America. Who gave this man the authority? How did this man get so much authority? That's what I want to know. Is he trying to be some kind of world leader? Is he vying for that position? He certainly wants to be in the cabinet. You guys know about this whole globalist agenda, right? How they want to just rule the entire world. He probably wants to be the ruler of the American nation. I can see that for sure with all this garbage that's coming out of his mouth. As our authoritarian regimes continue to challenge global peace, Fitzpatrick says he stands firm in his belief that the defense of freedom requires unwavering strength, unity, and resolve. The world is watching. America must remain the leader of the free world, and we will meet this challenge. Fitzpatrick declared, "This is our moment to reaffirm our values, strengthen our alliances, and stand unflinchingly against tyranny." I call bullshit. America must always stand for peace through strength. Really, really, because George Washington had a total different take than Fitzpatrick. He said that we really shouldn't align with anybody. We should just really worry about ourselves. We shouldn't get involved in any kind of foreign affairs unless it directly impacts American citizens. You, Brian Fitzpatrick, are one of the most un-American, unpatriotic politicians I have ever had the displeasure of researching in my entire life. Brian Fitzpatrick is one of the most popular and richest politicians who was born in December 1973 in Levittown. You want to know what Pennsylvania say about Levittown? Explains a lot about Brian Fitzpatrick. American politician who is a Republican, member of the U.S. House of Representatives, serving at District 1, includes all of Bucks County, a mostly suburban county north of Philly, as well as a sliver of Montgomery County. And again, this is the richest district in PA. This is where most of the money is in Pennsylvania. After court ordering redistricting, Fitzpatrick's district was renumbered as the 1st district. It remained largely unchanged from the old 8th, but absorbed a larger slice of central Montgomery County. According to Nate Kahn of the New York Times, the old 8th had been one of the more regularly drawn districts in a map that had been thrown out as an unconstitutional partisan Republican gerrymander. The new 1st was slightly more democratic than its predecessor. And again, that's why you see Brian Fitzpatrick having to appeal to his Democratic constituents. That's why he goes against conservative values on issues that are really important to Democrats. He doesn't care about anything but his staying in power, because look at all the authority he has. Source of income? Politician. He's one of the richest politicians from the United States. It's interesting. His salary is $95,000, so the salary hike was temporarily suspended in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but raises resumed the following year. Of course they did. We lost our jobs, they got raises. Oh, this is really interesting. Look at this. Look at his net worth. Up until the pandemic hit, it skyrocketed into the millions. So Fitzpatrick was one of those really shady individuals who managed to profit from COVID. It looks like real estate property. COVID, isn't that when people were losing their homes because they couldn't afford their mortgages, because they weren't allowed to work, because of people like Brian Fitzpatrick dictating policy that wouldn't allow people to work and pay their mortgages? Yeah, that's when a lot of the real estate was acquired by the wealthy, right? BlackRock. All those disgusting human beings who created the pandemic for profit and to cull the masses. See, we can look into here. It looks like his assets were between $500,000 and $1 million until 2020. And by 2021, they jumped up $5 million. How did that happen? How was he able to become a millionaire during COVID? That'd be my guess. I'm going to have to look into that a little bit further, huh? Any politician who got rich during COVID should be looked into. What a disgrace. Oh, Brian Fitzpatrick and Israel money. Of course. Brian Fitzpatrick's campaign finance data reveals a significant portion of his funding comes from out-of-state sources. So it wasn't just real estate. With only 1% coming from small donors, his donations are primarily from PACs and wealthy individuals, indicating a strong financial backing from outside his district. I would love to know what wealthy individuals in his district, which ones contributed, because I'd like to look into every single one of them. Fitzpatrick's financial support is not reflective of his constituents' interests, as under 7.5% of his donations come from Pennsylvania 1st Congressional District. The majority of his funding is from men, reflecting his political stance and voting record. Fitzpatrick's financial support is a notable aspect of his campaign finance, which is tracked by Open Secrets and other political finance tracking groups. He's maintained strong support for Israel's military. Well, that's horrifying because we know that their military rapes prisoners. They were caught on camera very recently. The Advocacy General of the IDF approved the release of footage that captured Israeli military raping prisoners. It was a male prisoner that they were raping. And then, after that video was released, the Israeli people, I believe it was the ultra-Orthodox, protested that these military personnel might get into trouble. They called it the right to rape protest. And Fitzpatrick is okay with that. He supports that. Brian Fitzpatrick has maintained strong support for Israel's military. Really? And that was in August 2025? We all know about the genocide in Gaza. We all know about it by now. That's disgusting. It's disgusting that any politician, that any American politician would support Israeli military. You know, it's one thing to support the state of Israel. It's another thing completely to support its government or its military, because both of them are involved in genocide and also extortion and blackmail in the United States. So he supports Israeli military despite growing public disapproval since 2023. So he represents Ukraine, he represents Israel. But what about Pennsylvania? I haven't seen anything about PA yet in this stupid internet search. It's just Ukraine and Israel so far. Fitzpatrick maintains support for Israel as public opinion shifts on Gaza, according to polls. This is published in August 6, 2025. In the Bucks County Courier-Times. He's maintained strong support despite growing disapproval. U.S. taxpayers spent at least $17.9 billion on Israel's military in 2024. So the Biden administration and our disgusting politicians here in America approved giving Israeli military $17.9 billion in 2024. That is so infuriating. $17.9 billion for genocide. But as of July 2025, a month prior to Fitzpatrick saying that he still supports Israeli government and the military, even though a month prior, only a third of Americans approved of Israel's military action in Gaza, but yet doesn't care what his constituents say because he has an agenda. And by the way, this July 29th Gallup poll stating that only a third of Americans approve Israel's military action in Gaza, this is the lowest rating since the pollster began asking in November 2023. Support is declining amongst American citizens. Support seems to be increasing with Brian Fitzpatrick. I just can't even. You guys know that Israel knew about the attack, the October 7th attack, right? Egypt warned them. You guys knew that, right? The new poll came as Gaza approaches famine, according to the UN, after Israel's block of most food aid pushed thousands of people into starvation. Did you guys know about that? The Gaza death toll has surpassed 60,000, according to the health ministry. Experts in two major Israeli human rights organizations allege that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Their own human rights organizations say that they are committing genocide. But Fitzpatrick is going to double down, man. The same poll found more than half of Americans disapprove of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is currently in court, by the way. You guys probably didn't know about that either. For the first time since the Gallup began asking in 1997. Okay? For the first time since 1997, since it began asking, more than half of Americans disapprove of Netanyahu. Oh, I guess that means more than half of Americans are anti-Semitic. Retard. Netanyahu is a retard. The poll also shows a growing partisan split, with Republican support for Israel's military action holding fairly steady and approval of Netanyahu actually growing. So Republicans are mutually retarded in this matter. Republicans are slowly waking up, though. I know that for sure. In fact, every Republican that I know does not approve of Netanyahu. So, be interesting to see what they say now. Okay, here we go. Support for Israel's military action in Gaza by party ID. And our Democratic brothers and sisters are spot on with this. Good job, Democrats. You deserve credit. You called this bastard out for who he is. Good for you. Good for you, Democrats. Look at you. 8%. You're awesome on this matter. Proud of my Democratic brothers and sisters for being awake regarding Israel. But Republicans, you have to understand, Democrats, Republicans have been indoctrinated by the Catholic Church's daughters. All these denominations of the Catholic Church that are spewing lies to their congregations, these pastors are telling these Republicans lies. They're propagandizing the Bible. They're weaponizing the Bible against Republicans, conservatives who go to church. Okay? So let's not be too hard on Republicans. Listen, you guys were propagandized about Biden and Kamala. I mean, a lot of you even voted for Kamala. So don't throw stones, okay, Democrats? You're not perfect either. You're slow in the uptake too. Okay, so independents, they're still not as smart as the Democrats on this matter. And even independents, I mean, they're definitely a lot better than the, brainwashed Christian Republicans, but there are fewer state-level polls on Israel's military, but a Cato Institute poll published in September 2024 suggested Pennsylvania's views resemble those of other Americans. 42% said Israel's military action on October 7th was acceptable, but they only said that because they were lied to, okay? Israel knew about the attacks on October 7th, and they let them happen to excuse their genocide. And I think that's exactly what happened on September 11th. Bush exploited that. Or they did it themselves. I don't know. I don't know if the U.S. government were responsible for 9/11 or if they just knew about it and allowed it to happen in order for Bush to justify his war. But this is the same thing in Israel. Bucks County Fitzpatrick on Israel. But in a war that has seen the International Criminal Court in The Hague issue arrest warrants for top officials from both Israel and Hamas for alleged war crimes, Bucks County's representative, like most of Congress, has increasingly diverged from public opinion. They do not represent us. While Fitzpatrick has repeatedly co-sponsored legislation to prevent money from reaching Hamas since October 2023, he has continued pushing for additional military aid and weapons in Israel, just like he continues to push for additional military aid and weapons to Ukraine. Both unjust, corrupt, disgusting, genocidal wars. That's what Fitzpatrick supports. That's who he is. That's his fruit. And everybody needs to know this about him. Fitzpatrick's office did not respond to requests to interview the congressman, nor acknowledged that the requests were made. Wouldn't even acknowledge that these requests were made. Fitzpatrick won't even talk about it. No, he won't. Because we're peons and we don't matter. A former FBI agent who deployed to Iraq to interrogate people during the U.S. occupation, Fitzpatrick has long taken positions that align with U.S. interests abroad. No, that align with the U.S. government criminal network interests abroad, including on Russia-occupied Ukraine and Israel-occupied Palestine. If Hamas truly wants to work towards peace, it's very simple. But you know what? I know. If Russia truly wants to work towards peace, it's very simple. Leave Ukraine. Russia wants to stop Ukraine from unleashing another pandemic. That's what Russia wants to do. That's what we're not being told. That's why Russia is actually the good guys in this. And I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there, but just know that these are all lies. Brian Fitzpatrick is a snake. A former FBI agent, member of AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobbying group, were among Fitzpatrick's top contributors in recent years, and the congressman has long been outspoken about his support for Israel and maintaining the security of a key U.S. ally. And I'm telling you, Israel has never been an ally to the United States of America. Since its inception, the state of Israel has been blackmailing American leaders. Since its inception, they started smuggling weapons to Israel out of America because of this blackmail. Israel has never been an ally of ours. They've been an ally to the corrupt U.S. crime network, but they've never been an ally to the American people. Let's get that straight once and for all. This is not about the Israelis. This is not about the Jews. Although the ultra-Orthodox, I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of those people who spit on us. They spit on us. They spit on Christians. You know, they hate us, right? I'm not a fan of them, but this isn't even about them. This is about Netanyahu. This is about the Israeli government. This is about the Israeli military. And nothing about them equals ally to the American people. They are enemies of the American people. And that needs to become abundantly clear very, very soon. We need everyone to wake up as to who Israel is. But what's holding the truth back, it's not just these dirty politicians like Brian Fitzpatrick. It is American churches, the harlot's daughters. It's this whole liberation theology of social justice warriors. This is the Catholic Church's influence over the denominations. That's why I make these videos. I need to wake people up. We all need to wake people up and make them understand that they are supporting genocide and their own demise. Fitzpatrick has ardently supported Ukraine amid the Russian invasion, announcing he had met with Ukrainian Zelensky and visited the front lines. In February, he referred to Russia's military campaign as an illegal invasion and genocide. It is not. It is not. They are trying to protect the world from another pandemic. And I'm sure there's other reasons too. But last December, Fitzpatrick criticized allegations that Israel was committing genocide as anti-Semitic. So every time that any of us say Israel's committing genocide, Fitzpatrick is going to call us anti-Semitic, just like Netanyahu does. This guy is such a pig. The congressman co-chairs the House Anti-Semitism Task Force. My gosh. We pay for an anti-Semitism task force. Do you guys know that the term anti-Semitism was created just like the term conspiracy theory? Israel, Mossad, which is like the CIA in Israel, created the word anti-Semitism. Just like the CIA created the term conspiracy theorists to discredit people who speak out against their crimes. And this House Anti-Semitism Task Force needs to be dismantled. Excuse me for yelling. Stand firm with our friend and ally Israel as part of its mission. The GOP congressman vocally supported Israel's military last year as Congress mulled sending billions in additional aid amid Israel's bombing campaigns in Gaza. Yeah, we work so hard in America. We struggle so much to pay our bills and feed our children because people like Brian Fitzpatrick make sure that our money goes to killing Gazans. Okay? This is what Brian Fitzpatrick is all about. You either support Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas or you do not. Yeah, well, we do not, Brian. We do not. We choose to do not. That's what he said in 2024. It's time to put up or shut up. So Brian Fitzpatrick thinks we're anti-Semitic, and he tells us to shut up. Brian Fitzpatrick told us to shut up in 2024. How does this guy keep getting reelected? I think it's because he's an expert on stealing elections. Or he just keeps playing both sides so well. I don't know. In August 2024, he co-sponsored the Stand With Israel Act that would, under certain conditions, prohibit funding to the UN, which is just fine with me. Why are we funding the UN? You know, the UN traffics kids. Supposedly tunnels under the United Nations building. Yeah, you know about the tunnels under there? That's what survivors say. I believe the survivors. He voted in January to sanction International Criminal Court officials in a bill that specifically condemned the arrest warrant the ICC had issued for Netanyahu. Do you see what he did with his power and authority? In January, he voted to sanction the International Criminal Court officials. These are the same officials, International Criminal Court, that are investigating Pope Leo and the Ninth Circle cult. I wonder if he has anything to do with that organization. The Ninth Circle cult. In late February, he wrote that if Hamas didn't release a specific hostage, the group should be made to comply. Fitzpatrick seemed to scale back his public comments on Israel's Gaza offensive in recent months because he's trying to appeal to everybody. He sees public opinion. Oh, he's got to kind of change his rhetoric, right? Not his policy. Just his rhetoric. With just a few posts on social media in 2025, focused largely on releasing Hamas's hostages. In April, he signed a letter with other Congress people accusing Wikipedia of anti-Israel bias. He wastes so much time and money. But there was no mention of the letter on his social media or website reviewed in August. Who were the other Congress people who wrote that letter accusing Wikipedia of being anti-Semitic? Israel and Hamas had reached a ceasefire agreement at the start of 2025 that Israel then broke in March, blocking all food aid during the siege. But again, Fitzpatrick doubled down. Oh, look at this. Brian Fitzpatrick getting married to a Fox News reporter. Didn't we just learn recently that Fox News is a branch of the CIA? That sounds like a marriage made in hell. Yeah, this is right. No, thank you. Let's not even go there. Track APEC. Well, here you go. This is Pennsylvania here. Look at all these people getting all this money. And then you have Brian Fitzpatrick. Well, my goodness. He's making double what Fetterman and McCormick took. Holy moly. He's making far more. He's taking far more Israeli money than any of his peers. They're all traitors, though. The Equality Act. You guys know about the Equality Act? Man, it sounds great. It's like shit in a box. Mark guaranteed. The Equality Act is proposed legislation aimed at prohibiting discrimination based on sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And that's where they get us, folks. Sexual orientation. You know how they amended the definition of child pornography to child sexual abuse? There's a reason why they won't amend the term sexual orientation. And that's because it doesn't just include, homosexual men and women. It includes other things as well. You see where I'm going with this? Critiques argue that it could potentially protect individuals who are attracted to children. And we already know that Brian Fitzpatrick cares more about genocide than he does about protecting children in Pennsylvania from sexual exploitation, sexual abuse. We know that already. So, would it come as a surprise that he supports the Equality Act? Even though he's a Republican, right? Do you see how he likes to appease both sides? As the act does not explicitly define sex to include sexual orientation or gender identity, this has led to concerns that it may create a protected class for those who are attracted to minors. This was brought to the attention of those voting on this act. They could have amended it. They didn't. They should have amended it. You can't just say, oh no, that's not what it means. No, you amend it. Say, you know what? You're right. Good catch. Let's amend this. Let them know exactly what this act represents. No, they didn't change it. They kept it that way, allowing them to avoid legal protections against discrimination. The act has been described as a pedophile protection act. raising significant ethical and legal concerns about its implications for children and society. And he is one of 3 in the GOP, only one of 3 in the GOP who voted for the Equality Act. And why would you have to? Think about this. The Equality Act amends existing civil rights laws to explicitly include sexual orientation, which is very vague, and gender identification. Gender identification is already in the civil rights laws, man or woman. If I want to fire my employee because they started identifying as a freaking cat, I should be able to fire them, don't you think? Don't you think? No? No, I have to deal with some freaking cat job, some freaking nut job who wants to meow and poop in a cat box? I don't think so. These people are nuts. These are absolutely nuts. Lesbians and gays already have these rights. Pennsylvania 1st District, Brian Fitzpatrick. Here's his phone number, folks. His committee assignment, intelligence. Ways and means. This is more information into the Equality Act. And what is that flag? What the heck is that flag? That's not an American flag, people. Existing California law permitted individuals convicted of having non-forcible vaginal intercourse with a minor with certain age parameters to seek discretionary relief in court from automatically having to register as sex offenders. Protecting pedophiles in California. Literally, this is what's true. The passage of SB 145 extends that exception to people convicted of having non-forcible oral or anal sex with a minor. It leaves it up to the judge's discretion of whether or not a child sex offender must be placed on the sex offender registry. It's up to the judge. Does that make any sense to anybody? It's not up to a judge. If you are a child predator, you go on the child sex offender registry, period. Not in California. And I have a feeling that Pennsylvania is soon to follow. So-called Equality Act could undo free speech, mandate murder of unborn children, and make pedophiles a protected class. Million Voices Writers' Room, July 18th, 2025. It is designed to crush moral decency and religious freedom beneath the feet of the TQ plus agenda and lobby. The so-called Equality Act aims to make abortion a federal right, which is completely unconstitutional, and I don't care where you stand on abortion. We have to obey the laws of the land, and our Constitution states that we all have the right to life. You cannot federally mandate this. It is unconstitutional. It is not a federal right. It is unconstitutional. The Q in LGBTQ can also signify other sexual orientations, you guys. That's why it's a plus. Why don't people see this? I know a lot of people do, but so many still don't. Plus is pedophilia, you guys. It's also animals. Okay? It's disgusting. It's so disgusting. There's also a revolting movement trying to rebrand pedophiles as minor attracted people. That's the new terminology now. Which would also pretty much guarantee their protection under the bill. And things only get worse when you break down the rest of the bill. Liberty Action Council analysis, among other things, the Equality Act will mean that biological men will have the right to use women's bathrooms, showers, and locker rooms, even in schools. Why is Fitzpatrick trying to take rights and protections away from women and children? It not only endangers women, it endangers children as well. Young children often accompany their mothers into the bathrooms. Why won't Fitzpatrick protect women and children? Churches will be forced to provide equal access to LGBTQ+ ceremonies if the facilities are open to natural marriage ceremonies. Churches and religious schools will be forced to hire staff involved in LGBTQ+ conduct, give men access to restrooms, locker rooms, showers, and sports, allow boys to bunk with girls on camping and overnight trips, and provide insurance to cover hormones, mutilating surgeries, and chemical and surgical abortions. Do y'all know what's causing gender dysphoric disorder? Hormone blockers. Kids don't need additional hormones. They just need these hormone blocker chemicals out of their bodies. Y'all know what hormone blockers are? So the crappy chemicals and plastics that you're feeding your kids every day, every time you give your child a plastic bottle to drink out of. Plastic water bottle. They're ingesting hormone blockers. And with babies and young children, if their bodies are inundated with hormone blockers, they're going to suffer gender dysphoric disorder. So instead of focusing on the cause of GDD, they're passing laws like this. Does this make any sense to you? Instead of going after the companies who are putting these chemicals into products and into our water supply, and our food, and in our clothing, instead of going after them, they're just changing laws. They're taking protections away from women and children. Does this make any sense to you? Non-compliant churches and schools will lose federal, state, and local tax exemptions and accreditations. From pre-K, children will be taught that they can choose their gender. Instead of addressing the poisoning of our children that is causing them to suffer gender dysphoric disorder, a disorder that has nearly a 50% attempted suicide rate. Instead of forcing these chemical companies to remove hormone blockers from their products, they're doing this. Does this make any sense to anyone? From pre-K, children will be taught that they can choose their gender, will be encouraged to experiment with each other to find their identities, and will be able to demand opposite, both, and neither sex pronouns, he for a girl, Z for neither, MX for both. Pregnancy centers will be forced to provide abortion referrals. And this is exactly what Brian Fitzpatrick supports. Because of people like Brian Fitzpatrick, I have to spend my days talking about this stuff, this disgusting topic. I hate it so much. I hate it so much. California allows full-grown adults to marry children of any age. A recent study by McGill University shows that at least 23,600 child marriages took place in California between 2000 and 2018. The study found that the majority of these marriages were between adolescent and pre-adolescent girls to adult men. You guys, I'm not saying that all Democratic voters are pedophiles. They're not. That is a stupid thing to say. But these Democratic governors in these states like Wisconsin, they are allowing pedophilia to take place in their states. And they are shipping in, they are flying in military-aged men from nations like Afghanistan, where men buy girls from families, from their parents, as young as infants, often 5 and 6 years old, are sold into marriage. And they're flying these men in. We have hundreds of thousands of them now, probably millions of them now, in these democratic states. They're flying in child predators, and they're passing laws to protect those predators. This is not my opinion, this is fact. 2000 and 2018, there were 23,600 child marriages in California. More than 9,000 of those marriages involved children 15 and younger. If you vote for these governors, you're complicit. Just because you're ignorant doesn't mean you're not complicit. And 1,233 marriages were of 14, 13, and 10-year-old little girls to adult men. Knew, who asked that her last name not be used, is one of those children. I was 12. My husband was 23. This is not Afghanistan. This is California. This is the United States of America. I was 12, she says. My husband was 23. He told me he wanted to marry me. He picked me up and took me to his house. I have to take a break. I need to get through this. We like them young, explained Xiong, a member of the Hmong ethnic group in California, who related a common saying among men in their culture. If you marry a girl your age, by the time she has given you enough children, she will look twice your age. New was forced to marry the man and had her first child at 12. This is in California. She's a 16-year-old high school student now. She struggles to complete her homework, and she also cares for her 4 children, ages 1, 2, 3, and 4. The empowerment of this evil can be traced back to 2 perverse books by Dr. Alfred Kinsey, published in 1948 and 1953, respectively. The books were entitled Sexual Behavior in the Human Male and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. In developing these books, Kinsey paid pedophiles and pimps to rape, molest, and abuse people of every age. In Table 34 of his 1948 book, Kinsey cited the work of one of his team's child rapists by the name of Rex King, who kept detailing handwritten diaries regarding the more than 800 children he raped. Among the entries in his horrific table are listed detailing the physical reactions of 5-month-old babies. We have influencers who have been paid hundreds of millions of dollars. Supposed journalists, news broadcasters like Megyn Kelly, who instead of focusing on this kind of important work, are sitting down and celebrating murderous whores and calling us all crazy for questioning corruption. It makes me sick. That's why I made that video of the Hunger Games with Megyn Kelly's face on that freak. Remember that freaky guy, that fake freaky guy who interviewed all the contestants? Because that's what influencers like Megyn Kelly are to me. When I see them and listen to them, this is what comes to my mind. Kinsey was clearly evil beyond measure, but a billionaire's charity funded and promoted Kinsey's evil work. Surprise, surprise. pushing it for national acceptance. According to the Philanthropy News Digest, the Rockefeller Foundation became the primary financial backer of Kinsey's research, which led to the publication of his 1948 book. Rockefeller's the ones that destroyed the Medical Association in America. The Rockefellers. The details of Table 34 are sickening. Kinsey hated God, and he wanted to abolish all Judeo and Christian values and morals. His method advocates for the removal of all standards of decency pertaining to human sexuality, which in turn opens the door to pedophilia and much more. In 1953, Kinsey's work was used to justify changing the model penal code. Kinsey's premise insisted that any suppression of moral code regarding any sort of sexual behavior, no matter how deviant, was harmful. As a result of Kinsey's work, many state laws were changed in 1953 to lower the age of consent for sex, as well as reducing penalties for rape. The movement was undergirded by the evil pedophilia studies conducted by this madman and his select team of child rapists. Indiana University now boasts a statue of Kinsey. Studying his tables. And Congress is poised to pass H.R. 15, the Equality Act, which will protect and promote Kinsey's minor attracted persons while muzzling anyone seeking to protect children from him and his sick followers. That's because RFRA has been stripped from the bill. And RFRA is an acronym for Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act. The Equality Act removed Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act protections, meaning churches, schools, shelters, daycare centers, adoption agencies. Everyone will be forced to comply with the TQ plus agenda. Okay? I hope I am making this clear. And cognitive dissonance isn't compromising the health and safety of every child across this nation. I hope you're getting it through your head, what this Equality Act truly is. There's no excuses anymore. If you support it, you're a pedophile. You're an enabler. You're a groomer. You exploit children, period. So, Indiana University has some explaining to do, don't you think? Already 212 Democrats co-signed the bill. You see how Democrats have a problem with this more so than the Republicans, right? We see that? And there's strengths and weaknesses in both parties, mostly just weaknesses at this point. Do you see how Republicans would want to fight this bill? Even if it's just for this RFRA being removed. You see how this is a Democratic problem, right? You are right about other things, Democrats. You are on the right side of Israel and Netanyahu. You are on the right side of other things, but you are on the wrong side of pedophilia. Do you know that there's a Kinsey Institute? Alfred Charles Kinsey, born in 1894, died in 1956, was an American sexologist, biologist, professor of entomology and zoology, who in 1947 founded the Institute for Sex Research at Indiana University, now known as the Kinsey Institute for Research in Sex, Gender, and Reproduction. His work has influenced social and cultural values in the United States and United Kingdom, as well as internationally. Here's a picture of this disgusting human being. Oh, and look at this. Education. Harvard. Surprise, surprise. Like I say in all my videos, it wouldn't be a scandal if it didn't involve Harvard. He was in the Boy Scouts. That might explain it all right there, because we know what was going on in the Boy Scouts back then. Well, you should know. Everybody should know what was going on in the Boy Scouts back then. They were raping kids in the Boy Scouts back then. They raped kids in the Boy Scouts for a very, very long time. This was in the 40s and 50s. We know what happened in the 60s, right? The sexual revolution, spread of disease all across the nation. There is no safe sex anymore. Stop encouraging your children to explore their sexuality. Please. He's obsessed with homosexuality. Both of those books he wrote reached the top of the bestseller lists and turned him into a celebrity. Should have been put before a firing squad. These publications later became known as the Kinsey Reports, appeared in Time, Life, Look, McCall's. Allegations have been revived by a political fight inside the Indiana State Senate, but the opposition complained that these are warmed over internet memes. I keep coming back, IndyStar remarked. They cited long-held but largely debunked allegations about the work of Kinsey. They're still defending him to this day. What's going on in Indiana? So he lied. His data was manipulated. He might as well have worked for the CDC. Kinsey was raised as a Methodist. During his studies at Harvard, he apparently became agnostic or atheist. Of course, right? That's what these post-secondary institutions do. It is by design. Now, this is where it gets interesting. He was bisexual. Kinsey was a friend of the occult filmmaker Kenneth Anger. In 1955, both visited the Abbey of Thelema in Sicily, where Aleister Crowley, in which both were interested in, had established a commune. Now we know everything we need to know about Alfred Kinsey. And Aleister Crowley still influences American policy to this day because many American politicians are involved in the occult and the sexual abuse of children. Yep, this is all because of the Equality Act. So you can thank Fitzpatrick that I had to go into that disgusting rabbit hole just to expose his Equality Act. November 21st, 2025, H.R. 15 is a bill in the United States Congress. Okay, let's go back to Ukraine. Unfortunately, we still have to talk about human trafficking. Human trafficking in Ukraine. Brian Fitzpatrick's home, apparently, for 3 months. He loves Ukraine, doesn't he? In 2008, Ukraine was a source, transit, and destination country for men, women, and children trafficked transnationally for the purpose of commercial sex exploitation and forced labor. Ukrainian women were trafficked to Russia, Poland, Czech, Austria, Germany, United Kingdom, United States, Italy, Denmark, United Arab Emirates, Kazakhstan, Greece, Sweden, Spain, Croatia, Hungary, Slovenia, Turkey, Cyprus, Netherlands, Belarus, Japan, Norway, South Korea, and Bahrain. There were indications Ukraine is a destination for people from neighboring countries trafficked for forced labor and sexual exploitation. Okay, Ukraine is notorious for human trafficking and child exploitation, child sexual abuse. Okay, Ukraine is notorious. Not Russia, Ukraine. In addition, trafficking occurred within Ukraine. Men and women were trafficked within the country for the purpose of, Ukraine children were trafficked both internally and transnationally for commercial sexual exploitation, forced begging, and involuntary servitude. In the agricultural industry, which we saw in California earlier this year. That ice raid with all those children on that farm, on that weed farm. People who are against ICE need to understand that they represent the pedophiles. Let's keep going. In 2008, the government in Ukraine did not fully comply with the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. They would not comply. However, it was making significant efforts to do so. No, it wasn't. While there was little evidence of efforts to curb trafficking complicity of government officials, the United States Department Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons placed the country in Tier 2. There were indications Ukraine is a destination for people from neighboring countries trafficked for sexual exploitation. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick in unique position on Ukraine, October 6, 2019. Remember, the U.S. put them in Tier 2. The States Department's Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons placed the country in Tier 2. I go through all the tiers in a previous video with Mark Rubio because he just put out the U.S. report on trafficking. And it's really, it's vague. It's shady. Brian Fitzpatrick is an ex-FBI agent who investigated corruption in Ukraine. He was sent to Ukraine in 2015 to help that country crack down on corruption. Then how come they were still Tier 2? How come they still weren't complying with human trafficking? The government was trafficking children. It was established. It is well documented. Brian Fitzpatrick goes over to stop the corruption. But he doesn't stop the corruption. And instead, this whole freaking war, right? All this information about Burisma and the Bidens and the biolabs starts to leak. And the internet and these officials, including Brian Fitzpatrick, deny that it's even happening. He said, oh no, I went over there. I helped take care of the corruption. Don't worry about it. Don't look over here. Russia, 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 Russia. Russia, Russia. Brian Fitzpatrick lying about resolving the corruption. Jeff Brady byline. Just a year before Brian Fitzpatrick was elected to Congress in 2016, the FBI assigned him to work in Ukraine for a few months. Okay, think about that. He was elected into Congress in 2016. Just the year prior, in 2015, he was sent to crack down on the corruption in Ukraine by the FBI. It doesn't make any sense. Why would anybody believe that? The FBI is a domestic agency. Y'all know? Y'all know that, right? CIA is international. Why was Brian Fitzpatrick sent to Ukraine for 3 months by the FBI? You guys know about Romanian angels? Erica Kirk's foundation in Romania that's been alleged. Eyewitnesses, whistleblowers, all kinds of people, right? Come forward to say that they were trafficking children. Do you know who was named in that? Kash Patel, the director of the FBI. You think the FBI has been part of this child trafficking ring in the United States since at least Reagan? I do. I think they're still involved in it. This is an interview. So Jeff Brady byline states, just a year before Brian Fitzpatrick was elected to Congress in 2016, the FBI assigned him to work in Ukraine for a few months. It's Brian Fitzpatrick. So I got sent out there to give them a hand and help them set up what was known as the National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Is anybody buying that? Brady. Fitzpatrick talked with member station WHYY's Radio Times last Wednesday. Fitzpatrick, the Prosecutor General's office was a problem. There was a lot of corruption within that entity itself, and obviously it was believed that Mr. Shokin was part of that problem. That's Viktor Shokin, Brady asks, right? He was a Prosecutor General in Ukraine, which is like the Attorney General here in the U.S. Fitzpatrick's assessment of Shokin differs from that of fellow Republican President Trump. This is important. Think about this. Viktor Shokin, Prosecutor General in Ukraine. Do you remember what Biden said? Let me play this video for you.